recognized this new independence. And they went back to their states and began writing new constitutions for each of their states. Here in Pennsylvania, a committee was formed on July 8th, 1776. That committee met for the first time on July 15th, which would be yesterday, 1776, to begin writing our new Constitution, and they did something that was considered radical at the time. Our Constitution began with a declaration of our rights. Now, apparently it didn't stay radical very long, because just 21 years later, when our federal government came up with a Constitution, colony after colony after colony said they would only sign on if it would include a declaration or a Bill of Rights. It almost became conditional for the ratification of the Constitution. Now, those rights mean nothing if we choose to ignore them or we refuse to stand in support and defense of them. Like the muscles of our own body, if we make no use of them, we weaken, and when it comes time to need them, we are not equipped for the fight. From time to time in the short history of the Lebanon 9/12, we have recognized individuals who have flexed those muscles of freedom and liberty. Men and women who have taken bold stances for our rights, often sacrificing of themselves in doing so. As we sit in this room each month, we look around ourselves and we ask ourselves, where are the young people? Why aren't they more involved? Well, I'm here to tell you tonight that they're out there. I've met several of them, and I'm amazed at some of the things that I've seen. Tonight you're going to meet two of them. Again, there are others like them. Those who have refused to accept the indoctrination, this indoctrination of submission and surrendering of our rights, and those who have seen some of what we have seen. And they're willing to stand in that gap and build new bridges and highways to our freedom and our independence. It is our hope that their actions might serve as an inspiration to others in their generation and to us, to do as they have done in their own unique ways through a spirit of citizenship and with the heart of a patriot. And with that, we're going to introduce the first of our young patriots.
Several years ago, I started attending the Lebanon City Council meetings. Originally, the phrase that I heard most often was, hearing 5 yeas and no nays, the ordinance is adopted. That all began to change about a year and a half ago when I started hearing words like Constitution and state sovereignty and 10th Amendment and no. While most of the meetings are fairly routine, a citizen alerting the council to a problem in the city, or thanking the council or another city department for solving another problem. Occasionally there's a meeting that I'm so glad I didn't miss. March of this year is one of those meetings. A young man of 15 came before city council and laid out a case before them, the likes of which I doubt our local city council has ever seen before. This young man exemplifies what a good citizen should be: informed, involved, and ready to take a stand. I'm going to let him tell you why the issue he raised was important to him. At this time, it's quite an honor for me to introduce to you Reid Dissinger.
A couple of months ago in March, I asked City Council to consider making Lebanon a no-fly zone for military drones. Our government wants drones to watch over American soil. They believe that it will make citizens safer. But drones can track citizens through their cell phones, identify that they have a handgun, fire rubber bullets to intimidate them, or just kill them with live ammunition because they're accused of being terrorists. These drones aren't fail-proof either. There are many cases where these drones have crashed. If a drone was over Lebanon and crashed, it could cause many fatalities. With 71 American drone crashes since 2007, you could say that it's not uncommon for a drone crash. The FAA has already authorized 63 U.S. launch sites and issued more than 300 temporary licenses to operate these flying robots over American soil. I fear that these drones pose a large threat to public safety, as well as our civil liberties and Fourth Amendment. Drones are one of the things that are looked over and just like forgot about, and no one really cares about it, but it's a serious thing. And when people recognize that, that's when change will happen.
Sue and I have a favorite movie, and some of you know this. When we were married 13 years ago, portions of that movie had actually made its way into our wedding ceremony. The movie is the musical 1776. At one point in the movie, John Adams, who up to this point in the movie has been leading in the efforts of the Continental Congress to move towards American independence, asks this simple question. Does anybody see what I see? One of the greatest joys of doing the work that I do in the Lebanon 912 project is that I get a chance to go out and meet with other groups and meet with other people. In the process, I met a man named Rich Martino down here, who works for the Daniel Boone Taxpayers Association. He's also a candidate for school board this year. And Rich is one of those guys that's out there and is fighting. He's not the young patriot. He doesn't qualify. He introduced me to a young man who's going to tell you more about himself. But before I do, I need to say this. Connor has continually served as an inspiration to me. And knowing that what we are doing is not in vain, that there are young people out there, not who are waiting for us to pass the baton on to them, but have already firmly grasped that baton and are already running this race with endurance, with their eyes fixed and focused on the prize. So with that, I introduce Connor Kurtz.
Thank you, Mr. Rodkey, for that phenomenal introduction. And thank you. You are one of the most constitutionally literate individuals I know. Speak of inspirations, and Mr. Rodkey certainly is. It was very interesting. I didn't know this. You mentioned 1776 was your favorite movie. Well, for the first time in my life, I saw 1776 last night. So, that's just very interesting. You don't really too often hear about that discussed, but I just thought that was interesting. I was speaking to Mrs. Rodkey a few nights ago at the Berks County Tea Party meeting, at which I had the privilege of speaking, and I asked her, am I expected to say anything tonight? And she said, yes. Yes, you are. And I asked, well, what am I supposed to talk about? And she said, oh, talk about you. And I thought, well, I'm not a politician. I can't really talk about myself for an extended period of time. But then I figured I'd give it a try. And I have a few things here. I'm Connor Kurtz. I was elected to the Daniel Boone School Board in 2011 at age 18. And at the time, I believe I was perhaps the youngest elected official in America. It's difficult to keep track of that. They don't have a list. But I was definitely the youngest school board member in Berks County. I'll give you a little bit of background as to my political journey and my journey as a conservative, because I believe that is it's really kind of integral to my role and the person who I've become. I was never really interested in politics until one day we were cleaning out my basement. My mom, my dad, my brother, and myself. My little sister wasn't, but I guess sometimes it's how little sisters are. And I came across a book. It was a thicker book. And it had an American flag on the cover and a picture of President Reid. And it was called An American Life. And I'm not sure if anybody, I'm sure people here have read it. It was President Reagan's autobiography. And again, like I said, I wasn't interested in politics, but I saw this book and I thought it would be interesting. So I picked it up and I began reading it. And I just realized what a phenomenal president and phenomenal patriot and phenomenal man Ronald Reagan was. And that was the beginning of my journey. This was at the same time as President Bush was president. And it was towards the end of his presidency where no matter where you turned, everybody disliked, or it seems that everybody disliked President Bush. The media was crucifying him. And I couldn't help but step back and ask myself, what has this man done that is so terrible? He seems to be a dedicated man who wants to help this country, and I didn't agree with every decision that he made. But when you see the way that these people are attacking him, it really makes you think. And at that point, I really began to identify as a conservative. I knew that I shared Ronald Reagan's vision, and I viewed America as a shining city on a hill. One that has never, citing an idea that has never really taken root anywhere else in the world. It has now, at the time. It was really it was an experiment. And we look back and we wonder, how long can that experiment last? And I believe that if we believe the principles of Ronald Reagan, we can continue this journey as a country. That's how I became a conservative. If you'd let me humor you and explain how I got involved in the Denver School Board, that's also very interesting. If any of you have gone to school board meetings, again, I'm sure many of you have. If you haven't, I definitely encourage you to go. But they're not always that passionate. They're not always, they're kind of routine. Again, 5-0 votes, not much controversy. Well, that changed at the first meeting I ever went to. And when my mother, my brother, and I were driving by Danny Middle School one day, and I don't know if many of you know about Danny Middle School, but it's a beautiful building. It was built a few years ago now, probably maybe about 8 years ago, approximately, and I believe it cost between $20 million and $35 million. I know it's a huge range, but it cost many millions of dollars, and it's a beautiful building, like I said. But in front of the building, there were 3 flagpoles. One for the Pennsylvania flag, one for the American flag, and then one other flagpole. I think it's for like a school flag or something. It usually doesn't have anything flying on it, which makes you wonder why do we need the flag there. But I guess it's not how government operates. It's not what do we need, but why don't we get it anyway? Well, I saw the American flag, and it was flying. It was flying in tatters. It was torn by the wind, and it was heavily faded. The Pennsylvania flag should be dark blue. It was light blue because of exposure to the elements. And I wondered to myself, how could that happen? How could the American flag, the symbol of our democracy, be allowed to fly in that condition? And moreover, how could it be allowed to fly in that condition? You had people driving by that flag day after day after day. You had administrators, you had agents of the government, you had teachers, you had students, you had parents driving by that flag. Why did nobody say anything? Well, I went to a school board meeting, I was going to say something. I didn't want to I had to say something, I felt. And I went into the cafeteria where the school board meeting was being held, and I looked around. And you had on the wall 2 giant plasma screen televisions hanging on the wall in the cafeteria. And I thought to myself, we can afford these televisions, but we can't afford to replace the American flag. And I got up and I said that. And the school board was not happy to hear me say that. They did not like me bringing attention to their families. Well, I went to that meeting, and I kept going back, because at these school board meetings, and at city council meetings, I'm sure, they talk about one issue, but it's never resolved. You have to come back to the next meeting, then the next meeting, the next meeting, and eventually, you just keep going back, and I did. year, elections were coming up, and I was only 17 at the time. And I was thinking, you know what? I might as well, if I'm going to be coming to these meetings, I might as well have a seat at the table and try to get my opinion out there a little bit more. So I decided that I was going to try to run for school board. And I was only 17. I didn't really think it would work out for a variety of reasons. Well, I filed the paperwork, I got my signatures, and I made it onto the ballot. And then I began the campaign, and some people were a little bit annoyed that a 17-year-old going around wanting to run the school district he was a student of. And it bothered a lot of people. I won the Republican nomination. It was a four-way race. I won the Republican nomination with about 48% of the vote. My nearest opponent had, I believe, 20%. And I also won the Democratic nomination with, I believe I had around 45% of the vote, and I'm proud to say I defeated two actual Democrats for the Democratic nomination. And then I went into the general election as the nominee for the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, and I won. And I was sworn in December. I won the election only, I believe, 2 months after my 18th birthday. And I was sworn in, and now that I've been on the board, it's going to be 2 years in December, which you wonder where the time has gone. But when looking back, I do believe I've made some significant achievements, and I've contributed a lot to the district, I believe. We've had 2 years of no property tax increases. Rich up here can tell you, because he was at the podium year after year telling the school board that you just can't keep raising taxes, and they didn't get it. They raised taxes 1 year 10%. A 10% property tax increase. If you're retired and you're living on a fixed income, can you afford a 10% property tax increase? No. But the Denver School Board, they had buildings they had to build. They had TVs they had to buy. So they were going to raise those taxes. Well, not this year and not last year. And hopefully not next year. We also removed a television program from our schools called Channel 1 News. I'm not sure if anybody here is familiar with this program. How it works out, back in the early 1990s, a media company wanted to get advertisements into schools, and they made a lot of money doing this. And they were trying to figure out, how can we get into schools? And they came up with a solution of giving away free television sets to public schools. And in return, the schools would have to agree to show a news broadcast with up to, I believe, 3 minutes of commercials every day. Now, those 3 minutes of commercials are using your tax dollars. That's time that should be spent teaching, not sitting at a desk, having kids watch a television screen. You should be teaching, and on top of that, kids should be learning, not subjected to commercials in school. I mean, they're subjected to commercials everywhere else. Well, nobody knew about Channel 1 because they're not in the schools every day, but as a student, I was, and I knew about it. So we got Channel 1 in our school district, and we restored 13 minutes every day to education, which is where it belongs, and that adds up. That adds up to days of educational time over the course of the year. And then one thing I'm currently working on is a transparency initiative to get as much information on our school district website as possible, because people need to know what their money is being spent on. I firmly believe that. And that's an excellent segue to the next thing I want to talk about. I don't want to take up too much of your time.
What about the flag?
Oh, yes, the flag. The flag was replaced 2 days after I spoke. So they after I was elected to our school board, my board voted to place me on the Berks County Intermediate Unit Board of Directors. Now, Pennsylvania has, I believe, 29, okay. 29 intermediate units all across the state. And I think they're kind of unnecessary. They are, they're relics of back when the county had a superintendent. Every county had a superintendent of schools. And that was eliminated, I believe, in the 60s. Again, the date might be incorrect, but they're not around anymore. Now we have 500 school districts instead. Well, back when that switched over, they established the intermediate unit, and they're still around now. And Berks County Intermediate Unit has a budget, I believe, of around $170 million a year. A little bit of it comes from local school districts. By a little, I mean a few $1 million. To us, that's not a little, but to government, that's a small fraction, unfortunately. Well, our school board elected me to that position. I was a little bit surprised because, keep in mind, I have been holding the school board's feet to the fire now for over a year, but nobody else really wanted to do this, so I just said, I'll do it. And my first meeting, I walked in, and I saw a table in the back of the room with stuffed animals on it. And I brought one along today. This is it. It's an alligator. And it says BCIU. It has a handkerchief. It says BCIU. And I thought this was interesting because I asked why do we have these stuffed animals at this education agency. And at the end of the meeting, I found out. It turns out it was Board Appreciation Month. And if that isn't a Hallmark holiday, I don't know what is. They wanted to recognize us for all of our service, which, all right, thank you. I appreciate it. I don't need any gifts, but they had a table full of stuffed animals, and they said, take as many as you want. We have plenty. And you have plenty? You had board members walking out of that meeting with their arms full of stuffed animals. Now, when people say that we're not funding education, we're funding these guys instead. And it turns out it's been a tradition to give stuffed animals every year. So I just brought this along. There is waste out there, and we can find it, and it's tangible. It's not always the government spending $500,000 to give a grant to a business to develop toothpaste for pets, which they've done. Just last year, the federal government did that, but even our local government does it. So always be on the lookout. If I can leave you with anything, I would leave you with that. And I thank you all for your passion and your dedication to liberty. It's very important. And we meet people out there, we meet young people, and I'm glad to see Reid, and there's many others in our community, but we need more. And organizations like this are so helpful because civics isn't being taught in schools like it used to. And that's unfortunate, and hopefully in Danville Boone we're going to begin changing that. But again, thank you for all you do. And you didn't come here to see me, so I'm going to turn it back over to Mr. Reid. Thank you again, and have a great day.
Yes. Did you hear that? I'm supposed to thank you for bringing Connor out of his shell to get him to talk about it. Senator Folmer is with us this evening, and he's going to make a presentation of the state constitutions. I'll let him take it from there.
Thank you. I know you called me. On behalf of the United States Senate, I will say this. I'm deep down. I really words cannot actually express how I'm feeling right now. Reid, your suggestion to the 11th State Council is a bill I actually have and stuff in state government committee, final zoning, right? But actually, we'll do that. That's the name from the we'll see where it goes. It's really hard to do some bills out of this committee that are constitutionally accurate, but it's a shame. But I want to thank you, and it's so inspiring. There are days when your parents hurt, and believe me, there's days that you feel as though, why am I here? Am I really doing anything worthwhile? And then I come to an event like this, and then I hear this. And to you, Connor, I'm going to tell you, first of all, there's 29 IU units. There's 8,500 employees. Just want to let you know that. 8,500 employees for 29 IU units. That's actually, and to talk along the comments that you made, and being there and seeing all the little stuffed animals. Because this really helps student inclusion. Oh, this makes it all much better. A couple years ago, at the end of the year, when the administration, I've been on the education committee, and now chairman, or majority chair of state So my staff and I challenged out, so we started looking into this massive $27 billion education budget. And that's what we spent from kindergarten to 12th grade, $27 billion. So you read in the newspaper how we've cut education to the bones. That $27 billion is more than 70 nations' GNPs around the world. Or 70 nations' gross national production is not what we spend on education in the state of Pennsylvania from kindergarten to 12th grade. So what we did is there was this giant redwood tree called the education budget, and we started chopping it. And we started to look at the IUs. And we looked at the IUs and the contracts between the IUs and the Department of Education. And we came across 36 curious-looking contracts. And those contracts, first of all, the contractees, you couldn't tell the difference that they were state employees or whether they were just contractors because they qualified for the pension, they qualified for the health care, and my experience is when we were going for our business was going for our ISO certificate, we hired an accounting firm to come in to contract out that work. Well, they weren't on Folmer's pension plan, they weren't on Folmer's health care. They would be paid the company and such, but this you can tell the difference. So there was 36 of these, and they were worth millions of dollars, more than enough to keep Polaris with. The poster child, and the reason I'm telling you this, I'm sorry for taking a long way around this, but you need to hear this. The poster child, the head contract, the one that stuck out the most, was for about $140,000, was to a gentleman that all he did was drive the Secretary of Education around the state. He was basically a chauffeur, that was it. And they justified it. See, and what they did was this. See, these 36 contractors who qualified for the pension and health care, I believe, I can't totally prove it, I believe they would let go from the front end and make it look like we were downsizing, then coming through the back end under a contract, under higher salaries so that they could pump up their pensions. That's my observation, that's what I believe occurred. So anyway, thank you very much for running 18 years old in Canada in the school board, and Reid, thank you so much. And on behalf of the Pennsylvania State Senate, I want to say that I'm honored to be able to present each of you our own state constitution tonight. Of anything, I just want to let you know this. It's a very detailed constitution, but, and if you get some in the back here, you might even fall asleep. But the Declaration of Rights, Article 1, know it inside and out. That is where, that's where the buck is. So, thank you so much. You guys are awesome, and I'm deeply honored to even be here today. God bless and Godspeed.
The Board of the Lebanon 912 Project would also like to make a formal recognition of these two young men by presenting them with the Young Patriots Citation of Recognition on behalf of the Lebanon 912 Project, along with a bound copy of the Constitution of the United States of America with selected writings from our founders so that you understand what the Constitution is supposed to mean in their words. It starts with James Otis. Those who come here regularly know that that's my favorite founder. But it starts with James Otis against the writs of assistance in 1761. So we would like to make these presentations to these young men at this time. Citations look a little something like this. just so you can all see them. But we're going to take a short break, and then we're going to come back and we're going to start talking about property tax and what's going on with the property tax movement. We're going to get Senator Folmer involved in that. We're going to get the guys from Islip, Pennsylvania involved in that. And there's a lot of good things happening on this. So I'm like really excited to bring you some of that information. But see these young men, thank them for what they've done, and get to know them a little better. I'm honored that they're here tonight, and they took time to come out and meet with us. So at that point, look, we're going to take about 10 minutes. Go to the bathroom if you have to. If you need to smoke, front porch. And over there is drinks and cookies, grab some stuff, and we're going to come back and we're going to talk about property tax.